Back on the Young Turks, we have a number of news stories for you, of course, developing this hour. We have elections in Virginia, New Jersey, Maine, and New York. New York's special election, 23rd District. We don't have any numbers on that yet. Maine is voting on gay marriage. We don't have numbers on that yet. We do have some numbers on polling data coming out of New Jersey and Virginia, and it doesn't look good for the Democrats. Chris Christie, who was the Republican in the race in New Jersey, apparently took 58% of the independent vote, according to early CNN exit poll data, and Corzine just took 33% of the independent vote. Now, the independent vote in New Jersey is 27%, so it's a pretty solid number. If you're losing that independent vote 58 to 33, you're in for a world of hurt. So if those numbers are true, I would be very surprised if Corzine pulled it out. Now, he had a lead all the way till basically 2 days ago, maybe even yesterday, but it seemed like it was slip-sliding away towards the end there. There are more Democratic voters than Republican voters in New Jersey, so they might make up for this gap in independent voters if the CNN numbers are correct, but that is obviously a very bad sign at this point. Now, in Virginia, it's even worse. 29% of the voters in the race are independents, and they're going to Bob McDonnell, the Republican in the race, 62 to 37. So those are walloping numbers, and does not look good in Virginia either. But exit polls in Virginia indicating McDonnell's going to win anyway. So that doesn't appear to be a nail-biter. New Jersey will check back in on. All right, now, this is now, it's election night, so it's also the first-year anniversary of Barack Obama's election. And so we look back now. Now, he didn't take office, of course, until January, but it's been a year since he won the election. Look back a little bit to see how he's doing, and honestly, Arianna Huffington started this. She put out a post on her website called Obama 1 Year Later, The Audacity of Winning versus the Timidity of Governing. And in that post, she talked about how she was reading the book by David Plouffe, who ran Obama's campaign, and how courageous they were during the campaign, how they would take the road less traveled, how they didn't believe in conventional wisdom of Washington. They purposely put their campaign headquarters in Chicago so that it wouldn't be in Washington and get corrupted by Washington. And all the dreams and hopes of change are in that book. And then when you look back a year later, it's tough. It's tough. We just don't see that same audacity in governing as we did when he was running. Now, it's fair to say that the Democrats have gotten a lot done, and the Obama White House, of course, has been critical in that. And I concede that. I'm not denying that here. But at the same time, on critical issues, here, let me give you what they've gotten done, because that's important, and you have to be fair in giving the whole context here. And funny enough, the Wall Street Journal had an article about this. Now, they seem to be, their editorial side has always been conservative. Their news side is straight news. Now, since Rupert Murdoch has bought it, you're already beginning to see, things creeping into their coverage where it seems questionable. This article is among them. It's written by Jonathan Weisman. It's called Democrats' Quiet Change Piles Up. Now, in the beginning, it explains what the change is, so you could view that as a positive. Then it spends 2/3 of the article saying how radical that change is and how dangerous it is, and how the Republicans are saying it has to be changed back, and there's been a quiet, he doesn't use the word revolution here in what's happening. But as I read it, I thought, these are all pretty easy, right? So I don't see what, this whole painting of them as if they're radical is flat out not true. I mean, so I already see Murdoch seeping through the Wall Street Journal. But to go to the heart of the article on what they did get done, those are facts, right? So here's what you should count in favor of the Democrats. Widening federal hate crimes laws to cover sexual orientation and gender identification. They just did that. Matthew Stafford and James Byrd law, and that went in with the Defense Authorization Bill. And so it has been widened to cover, as they point out here in the Wall Street Journal, gender identification and sexual orientation. Now, we know that. We just covered that. So that's good. That's definitely positive. And they also tightened the rules of admissible evidence for military commissions. The Bush administration was saying, hey, look, we'll do military commissions. It was kind of like a kangaroo court. If we tortured people, et cetera, we'll admit that evidence anyway, even though We've known throughout our legal history that that kind of evidence is unreliable. So they got those two things done, and when the Republicans were in charge, they didn't get them done. And the Matthew Shepard law went up for a vote 14 times, and they've been struggling for 12 years on it. So does it make a difference if there's a Democrat or a Republican? Yes. Now, given that the Democrats won, was it a fairly easy victory? I've got to say that it was. Now, that you don't take it away from them. That's definitely one in the win columns. All right, so now let's give them a little bit more credit here. They also did the Bedletter Act, which makes it easier for women to sue for equal pay. Another victory that Democrats care a lot about, rightfully so. They set aside land in the West for development, from development, so you can't drill in large tracts of the land that they set aside for public use. And then they gave the government power to regulate tobacco and to raise tobacco taxes to expand health insurance for children. Also, two important wins, and none of this stuff got done under Republicans, nor would it have ever gotten done under Republicans. If McCain had won, you would have had none of this, okay? So now, when they go after tobacco, now the tobacco lobby is greatly weakened these days, but at least they went after a lobby. Now, the other stuff is easier because you didn't have a major lobby to fight against. There was no power fighting you back altogether that hard. Nobody makes that much money on what the rules of evidence are in a military commission. Now, the Republicans fight you on it anyway, but the real question is, do the lobbyists fight you? Because they're the real power, right? But they beat the lobbyists a little bit in tobacco, and then here they are in the final set of accomplishments here. They killed weapons programs that have survived earlier attempts at termination. Again, I'm quoting the Wall Street Journal here. Among them, the F-22 fighter jet, the VH-71 presidential helicopter, and the Army's future combat system. Now, those are real wins against power, because the military-industrial complex has no interest in letting go of any weapons program, no matter how ridiculous, how unworkable, and how expensive, right? Because they make money off that. But they were aided in that victory by an unlikely ally. Unlikely just because you wouldn't normally think of this person as an ally, but he's been a leader in this issue. John McCain. John McCain came out very strongly in favor of getting rid of those programs which he thought was wasteful, and he helped President Obama do that, and he helped rally some Republicans to that cause. So and there it is, bipartisanship. And so give credit to both sides on that one. So they got some things done. So I don't want anybody pretending that it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican wins or that Obama hasn't gotten anything done. I never say that. That's not what I'm saying. Now, when you go to the negative side of the ledger, well, that's where we got the issues. Now, we know in healthcare reform, through every single source, every single report, that the Obama White House has been pushing for the trigger all along. Now, the trigger is a joke. It's saying, oh, it's exactly old Washington. We're going to give you reform. Ha ha, we're kidding. No, we're not. We're going to call it reform, but we're going to say we'll just take it up 5 years from now. I mean, that's the same old Washington that we thought Obama ran against. And that's what his White House, through Rahm Emanuel, apparently pushed all along. And now that fight is not over. And if you think the trigger is already gone, think again. You got Joe Lieberman and some of the other corporatist Democrats holding up the bill on the Senate side, and Rahm Emanuel and the Obama White House might come back with the compromise of the trigger. Now, that would be disastrous. And it's not about the trigger. It's not even about the public option. And I wrote about this today on Huffington Post as well. We'll put it up on the YoungTurks.com soon as well. It's not even about healthcare reform in its entirety. It's about what it represents. Is Obama willing to take on real power in Washington, the lobbyists and all the money that they give the politicians? It looks like he cut deals with Big Pharma, the hospitals, and other major healthcare providers. And we know he did. I mean, they say it's public, right? So they got something in return for those deals. They got $80 billion promise from the drug makers and even more than that from the hospitals. And they had to make some deals I'm uncomfortable with, I understand. But the deal that you can't negotiate away is, wait, are we really going to have this same system survive, where we do private insurance and all they care about is making profit? They don't really care to cover us. Or are we going to challenge that system and provide an alternative where we say, hey, you know what, we're going to cover everybody, and we're not going to do marketing, and we're not going to give billions of dollars to executives, and we're going to make it a lower cost for you. Now, if that's what he negotiates away, and it looks like that's what he's done so far, he still has time to make up for this, but what he's done so far, well, that's a bridge too far. Then you're not really fighting for us. and you're giving in to the power system of Washington. I don't even know if you're giving in. I don't know. Maybe that's what you wanted all along. Maybe Obama's a master chess player, but it wasn't Washington and the power players he was playing. It was us that he was playing. Is that possible? Certainly possible. The jury's still out. It's still early, just the first year, right? Now, the second thing is financial reform. And so far, the financial reform has been comically weak. And those are the real power players. Dick Durbin, number 2 man in the Senate for the Democrats, said the banks still run this place. Even though the banks were bankrupt and the government had to rescue them, it doesn't matter. They got the politicians in their back pockets. So they could keep getting rescued all day long. And so when you put together financial reform, they go ahead and kill it. And they water it down and they water it down. And we've shown you, at this point, almost dozens of cases where the White House, under the leadership of Tim Geithner at Treasury and Larry Summers, the top economic advisor for President Obama, have watered down the reform till you've got almost nothing left. As experts have said, they've got loopholes you could drive trucks through. So are they on our side or are they not on our side? Is that the guy we elected or not? The jury's still out. So that's what I wrote. Arianna Huffington wrote, it's that this is not the audacity of governing, it's the timidity of governing. And Bill Maher also wrote, is this as good as it gets from Obama? And I was heartened by reading Maher and Huffington a little bit because this is what I've been saying on the show for a long, long time now. And it's good to know that you look around and you go, okay, I'm not the only one. It's that famous scene in Zoolander, if any scene in Zoolander could be famous, where Will Ferrell says, am I the one that took the crazy pill? And so you look around and you go, okay, good, I'm not the only one. Yes, these actions in real reform, real change, are really disappointing so far. Now, he can rescue all this. The financial reform stuff has not gone through Congress yet. He can change his mind and make it tougher. The health care reform, it's being decided right now. And he could pressure those Democratic senators to go with a real public option. He can. He hasn't done it yet, but he can. So in a year from Obama's election, it's a little sad, or you could look at it as glass half full and say, you could be hopeful still, have the audacity of hope, if you will, that the jury's still out on him. So let's see what happens in the next year. But I'll tell you what, as I wrote in my blog post, if in the second year he does the same thing he did in the first year, well, then we're not going to get real change. We're going to get mediocre change. We're going to get half-hearted change. We're going to get 5% change. We're going to get change that the lobbyists will agree to. And that's not the change we voted for. And then we got a much tougher fight, because then we'll have to take on the White House as well. And that will be profoundly disappointing. And much more importantly, and this is why it's so critical, look, there's a second calamity coming. The financial system has not been fixed. It will crash again. It's a guarantee. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Is it a year, 2 years, 5 years? We don't know, right? But if the system isn't fixed, the same exact things that led to this first crash will lead to the second crash. And then the second crash, we have no more money. We're out of money. And so that's why it's got to get fixed now. That's why, in my opinion, it's the most critical issue. And if Obama's not on our side and he doesn't really intend to fix it, well, then we're in a world of trouble. And so, as I wrote and as Eminem would say, who's the real Slim Shady? Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? And we got to ask, will the real Barack Obama please stand up? He doesn't have that much more time anymore. And if the real Obama is the one that is not pushing for reform, but to keep the status quo, that obviously is a very, very bad sign. All right, more discussion on those financial reforms to give you some specifics. We'll bring on a guest to talk about it in the next segment. Young Turks. Back on the Young Turks. Now we want to dive a little bit more into financial reform because as complicated as this issue can be, it is the most important topic in my opinion, because if this system crashes again, we're just flat out of money. So we better make sure that we get it right this time around. And I'm not nearly confident enough that we're going in that direction. We're going to have Shaheen Nasirapur come on from Huffington Post. He's handling some of the financial news for them to talk to us about what some of the latest dealings are on the reform side. So Shaheen, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
We appreciate your time. So first, I want to talk about something you wrote today about how the White House might quietly be working with some of the, what I call corporatist Democrats, to try to water down reform. Let's talk about this Investor Protection Act of 2009. So let's set that out for people. What is the Investor Protection of 2009, and what do the corporatist Democrats want to do with it?
Well, essentially, the act, it's looking to beef up investor protections. There's a variety of measures and provisions in place that they want to do, that they want to put in place. And what's happening now, essentially this is all coming after the crisis. And so what's being done now is some interests are using the bill to kind of go back and revise, pro-corporate reform measures that were instituted years ago. Sarbanes-Oxley being one of them. And so that's kind of the state of play as is now.
So in the middle of trying to do reform to fix what went wrong in 2008, you're saying that they're going back and undoing what we fixed back in 2002 after the Enron mess.
That's what they're trying, right.
Okay, that seems like a bad idea. Now, what would they be undoing, Shaheen?
So specifically, there are a few amendments to the bill. One that was offered by John Adler of New Jersey, another one, Carolyn Maloney of New York. They're both Democrats. Adler is a freshman Dem. He won in a Republican district in 2008, thanks to the Obama campaign. Anyway, what they're trying to do is take out a provision of this act from 2002 that mandates companies get audits of their internal controls. It sounds really, opaque. Essentially what it mandates is companies have to get an audit of their own programs that they have in place to, reduce, eliminate, keep watch over fraud and waste within the company. These two amendments that they're offering are trying to get rid of that provision for smaller public companies.
Well, smaller public companies, so they must be pretty small. How much is the cap for these so-called smaller companies?
Well, Adler's original amendment would have exempted or temporarily exempted companies with up to a public float of $700 million. Now, they use the phrase small business. Small business and $700 million usually don't go in the same sentence. At least that's what people tell me. Also, up to $700 million, that's about 4 out of 5 publicly traded companies in the U.S. That's a pretty big hole.
So that loophole covers 80% of the business in the country. That way, the government has a tougher time finding out what they're even up to and whether they're even complying with their own internal checks for risk, among other things.
More importantly, investors can't get an outside opinion to see if these companies are essentially keeping tabs on themselves. Now, Adler was beaten back last week, but he's got a new amendment out which passed, via voice vote today, and it's going to be voted on tomorrow. And
what does the new amendment say?
His new amendment calls for a permanent exemption for all companies under $75 million. So that's about half of all publicly traded companies. It also calls for a study of the costs associated with complying with this provision for companies between the $75 million and $250 million level.
Okay, so, well, that's getting a little bit more reasonable because then you're under $75 million. That's closer to smaller business, although that's still 50%, as you said, of the businesses. Now, why is he doing this?
That's the thing. Some people, small business advocates, they'll say that, look, these costs are really high. If you're a small company and you're just getting off the ground, you can't afford to spend, $100,000, $150,000 on an audit for your internal controls. That's money better spent for hiring more employees, for example, or investing in your company. People on the other side say, look, smaller companies are the ones that are most prone to fraud and abuse. We need those audits in there to protect investors from getting fleeced down the road. The thing is, Adler, this thing is really popular with small businesses, Chamber of Commerce, the exchanges. And so some people say that Adler is, quote, dialing for dollars, that he's beefing up for his re-election campaign in 2010.
Yeah, and who's his ally in this new fight?
White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, the reason Rahm is doing that, as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is he wants the guys like Adler to win re-election, and he thinks they're going to win re-election if they grab lobbyist money. And if they grab enough lobbyist money and deny that money to their opponents, that helps their cause. So he thinks, well, let's do them favors here and there, and that this would be one of the favors. Am I misreading that, or does that seem like that seems to be the game that's being played?
Well, I can't speak to that specifically. All I know is that Adler's a freshman Dem from a Republican district. I would imagine that the White House wants to have as many Democrats in Congress as they possibly can. So I'm guessing that they would probably do everything that they can to help those Democrats win re-election. And if Adler can do so by positioning himself as a champion of small business, I'm imagining that the White House would try to help him out.
I hear you on that. But look, I can live with the $75 million. I might not be happy with it, but it's not $700 million. When you exempt companies and you call them small companies when they're under $700 million, then you're creating a loophole where people just try to get rich. Under $75 million, we're at least having a conversation. So let's turn to some of the other issues here. Now, we've got legislation working its way through on too big to fail, companies that are too big to fail. Now, this is very, very important because these are the guys that cause the problem in the first place. So what are the reforms that are out there right now that's being proposed? And then we'll get into who's on which side.
Well, Barney Frank has a bill out. He released a draft of his bill last week. He's got a new one coming out this week, or he's going to amend the bill. Anyway, what they're doing is, long story short, they're giving the Fed a lot more power. They're setting up the FDIC to be able to take over these large firms when they're about to fail. Some other things attached to this, they're going to try to keep the list of companies secret that are, quote unquote, too big to fail. And the administration wants companies to pay for the failures after the fact, as opposed to beforehand. So taxpayers will get stuck with the bill for like 5 years until the companies all pay back.
So once again, we have the administration supporting the banking lobby and not the people who are looking to head off another crisis. Again, am I misreading that, or is that what's happening there?
That's what a lot of people say. And, hearing what they have to say and looking at the proposals, it's hard. I mean, it's not easy to draft this kind of legislation. There's a lot of interests out there who, they all have reasonable arguments, but it's I'm having difficulty understanding why you'd have companies pay after the fact as opposed to beforehand. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, it makes sense if you want the companies to keep more money and send some of that money over to you in terms of corporate donations. Then it makes a lot more sense. All right. But look, let's talk about the upside too. What is Sheila Blair suggesting at the FDIC about regulating companies that are too big to fail? You wrote about that today and about the power to freeze derivatives contracts. I want to understand a little better.
Yeah, well, it's actually a really interesting proposal. So the way it stands now, when the FDIC can only take over failed banks. They can't take over, like let's say the Morgan Stanleys of the world, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers when it went under, or Bear Stearns when it was shuffled over to J.P. Morgan Chase. FDIC didn't have any power over these guys. With this new proposal in this bill, what they're proposing is to give the FDIC that authority. That if you have one of these large, systemically important, too big to fail firms, let's let the FDIC handle them because they're doing a decent job with banks. They can probably handle this. The thing is, a lot of critics will say, well, look, the FDIC, they've never really dealt with one of these, gigantic mega banks with billions upon billions upon billions in these complex derivative contracts. The thing is, with the banks, the FDIC can essentially put a freeze on all these derivatives contracts. When a company is about to go under, the counterparties will try to grab their money and get out the door before it's too late. You never want to be the last one looking for a chair when the music stops. Now, with this new proposal, they're going to extend that same authority that the FDIC has over banks to these other non-bank firms, like the Morgan Stanleys and the Goldman Sachs. So if one of these guys goes under, their counterparties can't rush in and say, I want to cash out all the derivatives contracts that I have with you. I'm going to take my money. I'm going to go out the door.
Shaheen,
the proposal says,
I'm sorry, just to jump in there. That sounds pretty good so far. And then what's the part about being able to pay less than the face value of the derivatives?
Well, the FDIC with banks has the authority to essentially pay less value on the contract. There's a lot of hoops that they have to jump through, but the fact of the matter is they can do it. So let's say, failed bank owes a counterparty $100 million. The FDIC can mandate, a haircut, essentially saying, look, you're going to get 70 cents on the dollar as opposed to 100 cents. This new proposal would extend that same authority for all firms that the FDIC would take over. A lot of people say it's actually pretty smart.
All right, that sounds very encouraging. So, but you got to give credit to the administration there, because Sheila Blair is part of the administration. Is that right? Or are there people secretly against her in the White House?
Oh, I don't know. I can't necessarily speak to that. I know the FDIC has been fighting for this. I know the administration actually first proposed this back in April, but no one knew if it was going to make it into the House or Senate bills until those bills came out. Barney Frank's bill came out last week, so you got to think someone's listening.
Right. Now, Sheila Blair is constantly fighting with Geithner from what we can tell. But anyway, she's in the administration. We score one for the administration there. I want to ask on one last issue here. Last week you wrote about this piece of legislation, which I thought was the single most logical piece of legislation I'd ever seen, where we would give more say to the shareholders in who runs the companies through the boards. And it seems like a very pro-capitalist bill, even though it was, I love the way I just framed it, even though it was put forward by Maxine Waters. Sorry. It was put together by Maxine Waters, and it was very pro-capitalist. Now, the Republicans are against it because I guess they don't want the owners of the companies to have as much say in their company. I can't believe that. Well, I can believe it. They're the Republicans. But I'm curious as to where the White House stands on that one.
I'm actually not sure. As it stands now, there was a temporary voice vote last week. A final roll call vote is going to happen tomorrow. Maxine Waters is saying that, look, shareholders should be allowed, to get their directors onto a company's board. So essentially they have more say over how the companies run, which I guess if you think about it would make sense since shareholders own the company. Business say that, look, this imposes a lot of costs, it's a lot of burden. It's hard for us to comply with all these new regulations. So I guess we'll see tomorrow how everyone, votes out on this.
So that's coming up for a vote tomorrow?
Correct.
Okay, well, there's a lot going on right now. I'll tell you what, that one is absolutely critical because it's comical for the guys who are running the companies to say, well, it's costly to listen to what our owners ask us to do. They own the company. Of course you should listen to what they do. And the reality of the matter is that the most costly thing of all is those executive salaries that they take that the owners might not agree to. That's why they're trying to protect their own power and why they've sent out the lobbies to try to kill that bill. So we'll see how that one does. And if you get any news on which side the administration is leaning on, that would be great as well. And Shaheen, it's been an excellent report. We appreciate you coming on. Shaheen Nasirpour is with Huffington Post, and thanks again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll be right back. Young Turks. We have results. We have results. It is election night. Don't forget that. It's a rather anticlimactic election night, if you ask me, but the Virginia race is over. It's done. Bob McDonnell, the Republican, has won. In fact, they've swept. They've also won the Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor. Republicans are back in Virginia. They had not had the governor's office for 12 years, which is very surprising. You think of Virginia as usually Republican, so it's been Democrat for a while, but no more. Bob McDonnell wins it in Virginia. Still no official results in New Jersey yet, and if there are, we'll get back to you on that as well. All right, now we go back to healthcare for a second. We've got a number of things that are going on there, and one of them is that the Republicans have finally put together their own proposal. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Now, there are many different components of it, which are laughable, of course. There are some components, to be fair, that aren't so bad. They say that insurance companies should be able to compete with one another in different states. I agree with that part. I really do. Part of the problem is, we had Bruce Braley, congressman from Iowa, on the show, and he explained that in his home state, for example, one company has 80% of the market. In Alabama, one company has 90% of the market. Now, if you allow companies from other states to compete, then that perhaps brings costs down. So there is something that's a little positive in that. Now, that would also reduce state regulation of insurance companies. So that's the downside to it, and maybe that's what they're going along with it. But anyway, I'll give them credit for that proposal. Now, one of the major problems with it is they didn't really do health care reform. They don't cover nearly as many people as the Democrats do. Not even close. I don't know if they were trying. And they don't cover pre-existing conditions. So the insurance companies can still deny you care. They can say, no, you had a pre-existing condition, or you filled out your form wrong, there's no issue of rescission, etc. No, they deny you care just like they are before. So how does that really change the system? Of course, they have tax cuts. I mean, they're Republicans, right? So they're like, I don't know, you sprinkle in some tax cuts, good enough. But at the end, you look at the bill and you're like, wait, I don't get it. Which part of this was reform? I mean, it's a joke. But they know it's never going to come into effect, and they know they don't have to bother, putting together a real proposal. But they want to be able to go to their base and say, see, we have our own proposal, and it does nothing. Isn't that great? So I find it comical, but who knows? Maybe they'll get away with it. If I was Democrats, I would pounce on that. Now, look, it's on the House side, and some Republicans in the past, a lot of Republicans in the past, even guys as conservative as Tom Coburn, Senator from Oklahoma, have said, well, obviously, you got to get rid of pre-existing conditions, that clause in contracts that denies so many Americans real health care coverage. But apparently, the Republicans decided in their infinite wisdom in the House that that is not the way to go. Now, if you think that's real health care reform, then I guess you vote for a Republican the next time around. And enjoy the same kind of health care reform they gave you in the last 8 years. Wait, I'm getting news in. Yeah, oh, that's right. They didn't give you any health care reform in the last 8 years, and that's exactly what they're promising now. In fact, on multiple occasions, they have promised that if they get back into power, they will repeal the health care reform that the Democrats pass, if they do wind up passing it. In fact, let's go to Orrin Hatch on that, because he seems very concerned about that. This is clip number 3. He's going to talk to a conservative news agency called CNS. So let's listen in on that. He's, of course, a Republican senator from Utah.
The Lewin Group, which has long been observed and relied upon by Democrats, the Lewin Group is owned by United Health. United Health is run by Democrats. And it's a great company, but the leaders are Democrats.
That's a joke.
The Lewin Group has long been admired as a pretty accurate healthcare analytical economic group. They said that if you move to a public option or public plan, that there would be as many as 119.1 million people go into Medicaid.
More than a third of all Americans.
Well, yeah. Can you imagine what that would do to the insurance industry? And it would just turn everything basically over to the government. And that's their goal. Move people into government that way. Do it in increments. They've actually said that. They've said it right out loud.
This is a step-by-step approach.
Step-by-step approach to socialized medicine. And if they get there, then, of course, you're going to have a rough time. You're going to have a very rough time, having two-party system in this country, because almost everybody's going to say all we ever were, all we ever are, all we ever hope to be depend on the Democratic Party.
All right, that was fantastic in a couple of ways. Number one, he's like, the Lewin Group is Democrats. What a load of crap. United Health is Democrats? United Health is one of the largest private insurance companies in the country, and they spend a tremendous amount of money in lobbyists trying to defeat health care reform. You know why? Their current CEO, for example, you know how much he took home in executive compensation? $700 million. You think he wants to compete with the public option? Well, then how the hell is the CEO going to take home $700 million? In a public option, the CEO doesn't take home more than $1 million probably. I don't know what the final number was, but it won't be $700 million. That's money that goes in our pocket and not his pocket. The previous CEO at United Health took home $1.5 billion. They say they're covering you. They're taking the money home. $1.5 billion for one guy. Okay? So, and they put together this fake study the Lewin Group did, paid for by lobbyist money, that said, oh my God, the public option is going to take over the whole country and 100 million people are going to sign up to it. But think about that. Even if that's true, isn't that great? That means that's the private insurance guy saying, yeah, we can't really compete. Oh, it'll take over because it'll definitely be cheaper and it'll be better coverage. So everybody will rush over there. And what would be the downside for us? I see the downside for you, but why do I care? Now, Orrin Hatch has forgotten that he serves the people, that he gets voted into office. He thinks he just serves the people who give him money. That helps him run ads and helps him win re-election. And the people who give him money say, oh, no, this is going to hurt our interests. You better vote against it. And then that gets to point number two. You see the panic in his voice at the end there? We won't have a two-party system. If they do the public option and it works and all the Americans sign on to it, then the Democrats will always win the elections. Yeah, because they were right. Now, hey, look, Orrin, if you're right and the public option passes and it's a disaster, well, then don't worry, you're going to win the elections. The Republican Party will be resurgent, and you'll get to say, hey, look at these Democrats. They gave the public option, and it cost us so much money and it didn't work. Well, you should vote for us, right? Right, Senator Hatch? No, you're worried that it's going to get enacted, it's going to work, Americans are going to love it, and they're never going to vote for your sorry ass again. That's what you're worried about. And if you listen to what he's saying, he actually makes it completely obvious. All right, so that's Orrin Hatch for you. Now, when we turn to conservative Democrats instead of conservative Republicans, we run into Ben Nelson. He's one of these guys who says he doesn't want the public option either. He's got some insurance interests in Nebraska that have fed him a lot of money as well. Well, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee did a poll in Nebraska, asked people, because, the conventional wisdom is, oh, well, what can Ben Nelson do? He's from a conservative state. They don't want the public option. So they did a poll. Let's find out, right? Are you going to be surprised to find out that even in Nebraska, the public option wins? It's close, 46-44, but it wins. So when they say, oh, no, people in Nebraska don't want it, that's just flat out not true. Now, when they asked people about the motivation of Ben Nelson, in the poll they asked, do you think Nelson's judgment on the issue could be clouded by the $2 million in campaign contribution that he's received from healthcare and insurance interests? Now, I know that's a loaded question, right? But people aren't stupid. They look at that and they go, yeah, it might have been clouded by that. 53-31, right? When you ask a more specific question on do you think insurance companies take away Nelson out of this and ask about the insurance companies. Do you think insurance companies put their own profits above the health of patients? 69% said, of course they do. They're in the profit business. They're not in your actually taking care of your health business. If they can avoid it, that'd be fantastic. They'd make more money. What I'm amused by is 19% of the people in Nebraska said, no, insurers put patients' health first. All right, if you think so. Okay. Now, you might be in for a rude awakening one day when you need the help and the health care, and they say, well, it's a little too expensive. We're going to go ahead and find a way not to pay. But you find out the hard way. Let's hope you don't. Let's hope Ben Nelson realizes the people in Nebraska want him to push for the public option. He votes the right direction, and we get it. And then Orrin Hatch will be worried about the results, which is that the Democrats will be awarded with victories. We'll see. It's just an option. Give it a shot. Let's see what happens. All right. Now, last thing on the healthcare front. Gretchen Carlson's talking to Michelle Bachmann, and Michelle Bachmann apparently is also organizing a protest just about the same time we are. I had no idea about this, but this is kind of funny. Let's go to clip number 2.
Do you still have concerns about the Democratic health care bill? Well, Minnesota Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann is asking Americans to come to Washington on Thursday to make a house call before the highly anticipated vote on House health care reform. Joining me live from D.C., Congresswoman Bachmann. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gretchen. Good to be with you.
Now, I know you and a group of other Republicans are having this town hall sort of get-together, noontime, high noon, Washington, D.C. on Thursday, and you're asking people across America to join you to do what?
Well, to come and let the members of Congress know that all of the messages that came out in August at the town halls and tea parties are still relevant. People don't want to have government take over their health care, and since the members of Congress have been back here for 2 months, they've kind of forgot that message. And so I think it's very important that they remember what the people told them. This is it. This is the Super Bowl of freedom this week, because socialized medicine is the crown jewel of socialism. This will change our country forever. Dramatic tax increases. It will cost senior citizens $500 billion in health care. There's a lot of reasons to oppose this bill, and truly, Gretchen, the only way they're going to listen is if real freedom-loving Americans come here to Washington noon on Thursday, look at the whites of their eyes of their members of Congress and say, don't you remember? I told you don't take away my health care. So it's imperative people come to the Capitol steps for a meetup. We'll have John Voight, the actor, Mark Levin, the author of Liberty and Tyranny. We have other guests that will be there. It's free, open to the public. But then we're asking people to go into the office buildings, Rayburn, Longworth, Cannon, to find their member of Congress and tell them, look, you have to vote no. We have very few options because we don't have the votes to stop this, but the American people do. They are the strongest voice we have, and so we're asking the American people come.
All right, well, people can get more information. They can go to foxandfriends.com. We'll link it to your website if they're interested in showing up Thursday at noon. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Fox News, for that commercial for those town hall events. Now, funny enough, we're doing an event. I had no idea what Bachmann was doing, but we're doing it in New York, L.A., and Atlanta in front of the CNN headquarters there. And you can find out more about that at theyoungturks.com, where we're coming with signs that just say the percentage of Americans that are in favor of the public option. And they're overwhelming, 77%, 59%, et cetera, et cetera. All we're going to do is show you the numbers and demand that CNN and the rest of the media cover it as it is, that the American people absolutely, positively want the public option in every single poll conducted. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a Fox News-like news operation on our side that just runs our commercial, right? I mean, they just get on there and they're like, oh, Michelle Bachmann, you'd like to do a town hall? Fantastic. This is what we've been looking for. Let's do a big ad for you guys. So now, TYT Army, are you going to let them get away with that? Or are you going to outshine them? Can you imagine if we had more people, we put together more people in a couple of days than they did? That would be amazing. Look, momentum is great, so go to theyoungturks.com. Check out our blog on that, and you'll get the Facebook events. You'll see other people that are going in that area. We're going to tape it. We're going to have signs. I'm going to the one in L.A. The whole TYT crew is. And we got other people that are part of the TYT family in New York and Atlanta, too. Let's outshine Michelle Bachmann. And if we do, that'll be amazing, given that they have enormous advertising on all the conservative talk shows, free advertising, and on Fox News Channel. All right, one last note for you guys today. Keith Bardwell, the Justice of the Peace, who refused to do the interracial marriages in Louisiana, has stepped down. It's a bit of a tragedy, but he's decided that he can't go forward anymore. He is resigning, and he never understood what the hubbub was about. What's the big deal? This is the guy that said, I have blacks over at my house all the time. I even let them use my bathroom. How could you call me racist? I just don't let them marry white people, that's all. Well, he stepped down, and so I guess that's the conclusion of that little bit of drama that we had in Louisiana. To be fair, some Republicans like Governor Bobby Jindal had asked him to step down as well. Other Republicans, including David Vitter, the senator, when asked about it, ran away and had no comment. I mean, if you can't come out against this guy, what does that say? I mean, it doesn't take a lot of courage to come out against this guy, but Vitter wouldn't even do that. All right, Young Turks.